Yay, another zombie movie, another found footage movie. I just can't wait to see this one. Of course, I'm being facetious because that is how a lot of people felt about this movie, but once they saw it, they started talking about it and saying how great it was. Luckily, none of my friends spoiled anything for me, and don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything for you either. One Cut of the Dead is a 2017 zombie horror comedy. It was written and directed by Shinichiro Ueda. It's based off of a play called Ghost in the Box by Ryoichi Wada. Ryoichi-san also helped adapt his play into the screenplay for this movie. So before I start my Halloween Spooktacular review for this movie, I want to say that most of the notes that I took were based off of the first act of this movie. The second and third act completely changed how you look at it. First up is story. So the premise is a film crew go out and shoot an independent zombie horror film in a place where zombies were rumored to have actually existed in the past. Yes, you've seen this premise done before, but in a different way in movies like Survival of the Dead. With the movie that they're filming being an indie, there are a lot of complications, there's a lot of frustrating things that the director has to deal with that really throw a wrench into his plans, which I can definitely identify with because most of the stuff that I've done was myself only, you know what I mean? It was me filming, editing, doing the sound. So there are a bunch of times though that I've directed, and about half of them I've gotten kind of frustrated because people take too long to do things to get set up, or they don't listen very well. So the portrayal of the director in this movie is pretty spot on. Sometimes you just get really frustrated and you gotta roll with the punches. So after the first act, the film takes kind of a left turn, and at first it was a little off-putting, but as it gets rolling, especially into the third act, it really picks up and it becomes kind of something special and makes the take on the crew filming a horror movie who actually gets attacked by monsters kind of fresh. So next is cinematography. Right away you're going to notice the documentary style filmmaking. It's very indie looking, and I think that's the point. It's done purposefully in this movie because this is the type of gear that indie filmmakers would be using, and it works. So the whole first act of this movie is one long take, and it took me a second to notice that. I was like, wait a second, they're not cutting. I wonder how long they're gonna go with this. And they did the whole first 37 minutes of this movie with no cuts, and I thought that was quite impressive. I say there are no cuts, but if somebody's really clever with their whip pans or doing something in the dark, they can make a cut there. It's usually pretty noticeable in something like Birdman, but in this one, it looked like it was one take. And that's made even more impressive when you consider the fact that these people were going in and out of different facilities and using shots in the outdoors. So when they transition from one place to another, and it's pretty much seamless. It's not always perfect, but I think that's the point because they're not trying to have it be this perfect thing because the movie that they're filming isn't perfect. Overall, the look of the film is pretty solid. It's never overexposed or underexposed or anything like that. There are some shots where it's a little bit dark, but they're inside this really dark place, and if you bump that ISO up too much, you're gonna get a bunch of noise. So I think it was a good choice to keep it a little darker like that. So it uses quiet pretty effectively, especially on some of the dialogue scenes and the scenes where the actors are trying to get to know each other. There are some pretty great sound effects in here, but there are also some pretty bad ones, but I think that's on purpose because they're used to an almost comedic effect. When there is music, it's pretty good. You know, it's nothing memorable, but it works for the film. It reminded me of the scene in Return of the Living Dead where the two guys are in the medical warehouse and they're talking about zombies and how Night of the Living Dead was based off of a real thing. They kind of do the same thing in here, but again, it is different. I actually lived in Japan for over 3 years and I took a Japanese language class in 6th grade for about a year. So I have a pretty deep appreciation for all things Japanese, and seeing this film, you know, in Japanese with the subtitles and the certain type of acting and comedy that they do, I really enjoyed it. And I think if you're not used to it, it might take you a second to adjust, but I think you'll really like it. So the whole second act is basically about world building because the first act kind of just throws you into the scary story or whatever, and the second act kind of flushes that out. So when the third act hits, it really pays off and it all ties together in one big beautiful package. Now, this being a Japanese film and partly a comedy, some of the shots and some of the acting will come off as a little cheesy, but they are earnest and they are heartfelt, and you can tell that they're really trying and that there's an effort, so it works. There is some tension throughout the movie, but it's never really a terrifying or scary experience. But there are parts where you do feel a little tense and you're wondering what's going on. And sometimes it pays off in a way that you didn't expect it at all. Given the nature of a one-take film, a lot of the effects and the timing of the scares and everything else are going to be a little limited, and it's going to be kind of off in some points, especially in that first act. I did a bunch of notes in the first act, talking about why didn't they do this? Why did they do that? Why did this person find this magical prop that wouldn't be there? Why was that there? And a lot of those things, but they were basically all negated by the second and third act. So as much as that format kind of did detract from the scares and the tension, it ended up being for a reason.
And now the moment we've all been waiting for is here.
We're out of time.
It's Judgment Day.
They made this movie for $25,000 US, and it's made about 30 million bucks. That's pretty awesome. And when you look at this team, to see that kind of success is pretty heartwarming, and it's really nice. It's a very fun, creative take on the zombie genre, something that no one has done. And once you get into the third act and watch some of the behind the scenes stuff that happens in the end credits, as a filmmaker, I was pretty impressed, to be honest. I mean, you have one crew filming another crew, all at the same time and not getting in each other's shots. So if you are a horror fan, a comedy fan, or just a fan of zombie movies, if you are a filmmaker, I highly recommend that you watch this one. And that's why I'm giving One Cut of the Dead an 8 out of 10.